Good morning, you guys. Here's a warm-up for you, so go ahead and pause the video and give it a try, then unpause it when you're ready for the answers. All right, if I ask you to find f of x equals 0, that means you're plugging in 0 for y. So what am I asking you to find? Well, if I plug in 0 for y, I'm trying to figure out what x is equal to. So here's what that means. I'm trying to figure out what x is equal to when y is 0. That sounds like an x-intercept to me, okay? So in this case, if I plug in 0 for this first one, what I need to do is set both parentheses separately equal to 0, kind of like we talked about in chapter 8. Add 1 to both sides here and subtract 4 to both sides here. So what am I asking you to find? I'm asking you to find the x-intercepts. If I said find the solutions, you would just say 1 and negative 4. If I'm asking you to find the x-intercepts, make sure you write it as 1, 0, negative 4, 0. So it just kind of depends. Since it doesn't specify, I'm going to go with x-intercepts since that's what we're trying to figure out. Same thing over here, plug in 0 for f of x. What's different about this one is you can't just change the symbol, right? Because the 2x minus 5 is going to give you something different. Now the x plus 6, you're going to get x is negative 6, so negative 6, 0, that's no big deal. But with the 2x minus 5, when you add 5 to both sides and then divide by 2, you're going to get an x-intercept of 5 halves. So you can't just say your x-intercept is positive 5 because the 2 in the front of the x kind of changes that. So the second question asks, what if I'm asking you to find f of 0? Well, now we're saying we're plugging in 0 for x and saying what do we get? So in this case, we're finding the y-intercept. Okay, find it for both functions. So if I plug in 0 for x on this one up top, right, I'm just using that same equation here. I get negative 1 times 4, which is negative 4. So my y-intercept is 0, negative 4. If I do the same thing with this guy right here, I get f of x equals, plug in 0 everywhere I see an x. So 2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 5 is negative 5. 0 plus 6 is 6. So that's going to give me negative 30. So my y-intercept is 0, negative 30. So this is why, you guys, this entire school year, I've been so picky about number, 0 versus 0, a number. And it's because these two ideas are completely different. Okay, and so we need to be ready for what is it they're asking of me when I'm finding those numbers. All right, let's talk about finding x-intercepts in different forms. So using this function, convert the function into factored form. So we talked about that in our last video where you want two numbers. Okay, you're going to use x and x in your two parentheses. And you want two numbers that add to give me negative 2, but multiply to give me negative 3. So obviously to multiply to get 3, I can only use 3 and 1. Those are my two options. To multiply to get negative 3, but add to get negative 2, let's make the 3 negative and the 1 positive. So then when it says, what are the x-intercepts of this equation? Well, what we have to do is, if we were to find x-intercepts, we're saying number, 0. If I were to plug in 0 for f of x, the problem with this is we get stuck. You might say, well, Mrs. Nurse, can't I just add 3 to both sides? Well, you can, but now what do? You can't divide everything by 2. You can't take the square root of both sides because these two terms are different from each other and you get stuck. Okay, so what we have to do when you're finding x-intercepts of something in standard form is you have to convert it into factored form like we did with part A, and then you can plug in the 0 and say, okay, now I can actually find my x-intercept. So one of them is 3, 0. The other one is negative 1, 0. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm going with today's lesson. All right, using this function, convert the function into vertex form. Go ahead and pause the video at this point in time and practice completing the square and changing it to vertex form just to see if you get it right. All right, so for this one, okay, there's a 1 in front of the x squared, so I don't have to do anything fancy. I can literally think of it as take half and square it, right? So I'm going to do the algebraic way, I think, because it seems like I've been getting the impression anyways that a lot of you guys like the algebraic way a little bit better. Okay, so half of negative 6 is negative 3, and negative 3 squared is 9. But remember, we can't just add 9 to an equation because we feel like it. we can add 0. So if I added 9 right there, I need to add -9 right here. So this is going to turn into -16. So here's my vertex form equation. Use the vertex form of the equation to find the exact values of the x-intercepts. So remember, x-intercepts are a number, comma 0. So I'm plugging in 0 for y, or in this case, plugging it in for f of x. So here's what's different with this one. In factored form, you set each factor equal to 0. When it's in vertex form, you literally just solve. So first thing I'm going to do is add 16 to both sides. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now here's the part you need to be careful of. Square rooting something that's squared makes it cancel, you get x minus 3. But on the left side, when you take the square root of 16, up to this point, you've been told the square root of 16 is 4. But here's my question for you. -4 times -4 is also 16. So shouldn't the square root of 16 be either -4 or +4? Well, yeah. So from this point on in quadratics and in math, when you take the square root of something, you have the plus version and the negative version. Now, up to this point, you weren't ready for the fact that -4 times -4 is 16, right? That would be kind of weird. But I think this is something you guys can handle. So now when I go to add 3 to both sides, here's what also is going to change. I'm going to put the +3 in front of the 4. And so here's what that means. There are two answers. One of them is 3 plus 4, which is 7. So 7, comma 0. And the other answer is 3 minus 4, which is -1. Okay, so that's where you get 2 x-intercepts from. When you're solving a quadratic, you should get 2 solutions or 2 x-intercepts, at least at most. All right, now letter C is asking you to convert the original equation into factored form. So pause and take a minute to see if you can do that. All right, so if I'm converting that into factored form, again, I need 2 numbers. Okay, x and x, but I need 2 numbers that add to give me -6 and multiply to give me -7. So I'm going to use -7 and +1. So if I want to find the x-intercepts here, I set it equal to 0. And I know I'm going to set each factor equal to that 0. So one of my answers is 7, the other one's -1. And 7, comma 0 and -1, comma 0 match exactly what we got up here. So the point I'm making basically is when you're trying to find solutions or x-intercepts, you can go lots of different directions and you can still get the same answer. All right, so here's last one using this function. Here's what I'd like you guys to do, okay? I want you to practice converting it into vertex form using completing the square. Notice how there's a 2 in the front, so completing the square is a little bit tougher, okay? Then I want you to also convert this equation into factored form. Again, notice how the 2's in the front, making factored form a little bit more challenging. So pause the video at this point in time and see how you do. All right, you should be ready to see your answer here. So in vertex form, because of the 2 in the front, personally, I'm going to do the algebraic way. Again, just because I'm getting the impression that most of you guys like the algebraic way better, that's all. So if I factor out the 2 out of the first 2 terms, okay, half of -10 is -5. -5 squared is 25, but don't forget, I didn't just add 25, I added 2 times 25, which is 50. So I need to subtract 50 over here. 18 plus -50, I get -32. The 2 is still out in the front. So here's my vertex form equation. Don't forget, you can also use the diagrams and use the blocks as well, and you would get the same answer. All right, if I want to do factored form, well, here's the problem with factored form. With the 2 in the front, I don't think it's going to work. But we did briefly talk about if you can divide out the 2 out of everything, then it's okay. And in this case, I can. I can take the 2 out of all 3 terms. And then what I can do is factor this stuff that's left over. And say, okay, what 2 numbers add to give me -10, but multiply to give me 9. So I'm going to work with -9 and -1. Now, when I go to solve for my x-intercepts, okay, basically what happens with the 2 in the front, it's almost like you're dividing both sides by 2, and 0 divided by 2 is just 0. So when you have that GCF in the front from factoring, it just kind of goes away. You can even ignore it if you want to. So one x-intercept is going to be 9, comma 0. The other one is going to be 1, 0. So let's solve it using vertex form and see if we get the same thing. All right, so I want x-intercepts, so I'm plugging in 0 for y, or in this case, f of x. So I'm going to add 32 to both sides, just like we did on the last slide. Here's the big difference right here, though, you guys. The next step on the last slide was taking the square root, but I need to get rid of that 2 out in front first. So I need to divide both sides by 2 first. So I get 16 equals x minus 5 squared. Now I can take the square root. So the right side will just be x minus 5, and the left side will be that plus or minus 4. Don't forget the plus or minus now, moving forward. Add 5 to both sides, but put the 5 in the front. Well, so one answer is 5 plus 4, which is 9. 9, 0 matches that guy, so far so good. The other answer is 5 minus 4, which is 1, and 1, 0 matches this guy as well. Okay, so nice work. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, you do not have an official homework assignment today. Your homework assignment is just to follow along with today's video, things like that. Tomorrow, I'm going to add just a little bit more to this concept, and then you'll have a homework assignment based on finding x-intercepts, given whatever form it is given in, okay? So have a good rest of your day, and I'll chat with you guys tomorrow. Don't forget, if you need anything, you can email me, or you can stop in for my office hours, where the link is posted on Google Classroom, okay? Bye, guys.